Does this active player graph look impressive to you? What about now? This game has existed for 26 years and you can practically draw a straight line to today, with the all-time high being hit just yesterday. When the entire AAA gaming industry is seemingly on fire, having constant $300 million failures, it seems like an absolute miracle that a game like this exists. Have you guessed it yet? This is a chart for Counter-Strike. Have you ever really wondered how can such a simple but difficult to master game not just survive but thrive for almost 3 decades, despite all the competition? I did too. That's why I dove deep to figure out exactly what their secret sauce is. Let's start at the beginning, because it's frankly insane that this even needs explaining. Counter-Strike wasn't born in some billion-dollar studio or brainstormed in a corporate pitch meeting. It started as a mod, a literal fan-made project hacked together by Min Kauso, Guzman Le and Jess Cliff in the late 90s. 2 guys, no budget, just a vision. They took Half-Life's engine and said, what if we made a tactical shooter that didn't suck? No gimmicks, no hand-holding, just tight gunplay, round-based tension, and sharp skill expression. And here's the part that still blows my mind. Within months of its public beta in 1999, Counter-Strike exploded. It didn't need a marketing campaign. It didn't need influencer trailers. It spread the old-fashioned way because people played it and it was that good. LAN cafes in the early 2000s, you walked in and 9 times out of 10, someone was playing Counter-Strike. Because nothing else felt like it. You win by being better, not by grinding loadouts, not by unlocking perks, not by mashing Q for your ult. Better aim, better decisions, better teamwork. That was the meta. Valve saw the goldmine in front of them and did something uncharacteristically smart for a publisher. They didn't interfere. Instead, they brought Min and Jess in-house and officially released Counter-Strike 1.0 in November 2000. What followed was nothing short of a cultural quake. CS 1.3, 1.5, 1.6. These weren't sequels, they were slow, deliberate evolutions. The gunplay tightened, the maps refined, the player base grew, but the soul never changed. And think about this. Counter-Strike 1.6 is still being played today. A 20-plus-year-old game with pixelated textures and janky netcode is somehow still more fun, more skillful and more respected than half the garbage on Steam's front page. That says everything. Then came Counter-Strike Source in 2004. Valve rebuilt the game on the Source engine, and guess what? Players argued for years whether 1.6 or Source was better. Not because either was bad, but because both were good in different ways. Can you imagine a modern franchise surviving that kind of split without collapsing entirely? Didn't think so. And then CSGO 2012, the moment where most franchises would have sold out completely. But Valve didn't cram it with kill streaks, loadouts or jetpacks. They kept the core and modernized the edges. A fresh coat of paint, better infrastructure, and eventually something no one saw coming: the skin economy, the esports boom, the absolute empire of CSGO that would shape the next decade of competitive gaming. But what's critical is this: from 1999 to now, 26 years, Counter-Strike hasn't been rebooted. It hasn't reinvented itself every 5 minutes. It's evolved, sure, but it's always been Counter-Strike. And that consistency is unheard of in this industry. You can't name another FPS that's even come close to pulling that off. Because CS wasn't built by marketers. It was built by players. For players. It wasn't designed to maximize session time or retention funnels. It was designed to be fun and fair. It wasn't trying to sell you something every 5 seconds. It was trying to challenge you. That's the foundation this game was built on. And that's why it's still standing, while everything else is collapsing. And you know what's funny? Mindler himself admitted that the fundamental design hasn't really changed since those early days. And why should it? When you nail a formula, you don't mess with it. But that's something modern studios apparently never learned. Look at the absolute dumpster fire that was Overwatch 2. Blizzard had one job: keep the fans happy and don't mess up a winning formula. And what do instead? They slap on a shiny new coat of paint, mess with progression and call it innovation. Or Battlefield 2042. EA stripped away almost everything fans liked about Battlefield, tried to chase trends by going hero shooter with specialists, and tanked their entire legacy in months. Imagine spending spending hundreds of millions just to systematically destroy the very identity your franchise spent decades building. Embarrassing. So why did Counter-Strike refuse to die while everyone else's sequels crashed and burned? Simple. It's because Valve respected their players' intelligence enough to never betray the core of their game. Instead of chasing temporary gimmicks, Valve doubled down on perfecting those original fundamentals. They trusted that their audience actually cared about playing the game well, rather than being dazzled by flashy nonsense. You might think I'm exaggerating, but just look at CS2. In an era where every sequel aggressively kills its own player base, CS2 managed smooth transition by keeping everything players loved. Skins, ranks, stats. Everything carried over, no strings attached. Imagine a developer actually respecting your time and investment in their game. Shocking concept, isn't it? I mean, Valve basically pressed an update button instead of a self-destruct one. CS2 wasn't really a sequel, it was more like a behind-the-scenes upgrade. Same gameplay, same feel, just running on a newer, more powerful engine without messing with what made it great in the first place. It got modernized visuals, better tick rate and physics, but the soul stayed intact. They refused to fragment or reset their players. And guess what happened? CS2 hit a staggering 1.47 million concurrent players at launch, and as of April 2025, they just broke their all-time peak at 1.86 million players. Most modern studios can't even maintain a fraction of that after their initial hype dies off. It's almost like if you treat your players well, they stick around. Now let's talk updates, because modern games treat players like dopamine-starved lab rats. Every modern live service shooter crams you full of daily rewards, battle passes, FOMO-inducing events, and piles of garbage content nobody asked for. They drip-feed you cosmetics and constantly beg you to buy meaningless digital junk. Apex Legends, Overwatch, and even Call of Duty are prime offenders here, bombarding you with limited time modes and skins and nonsense to disguise how hollow their gameplay has become. Can we be real for a second? Does anyone genuinely get excited about the 50th Battle Pass or the endless parade of low-effort cosmetic filler? Valve, though, they literally have the opposite philosophy: minimal but meaningful updates. When Valve changes something in CS, it's surgical, it's deliberate, and it actually matters. There's no filler, no fluff. Remember the R8 revolver disaster? When Valve accidentally introduced a ridiculously overpowered weapon, the community rightfully lost their minds. But here's the key difference: Valve immediately owned the mistake and fixed it within 48 hours. You hear that, Battlefield? 48 hours. When Battlefield 2042 launched completely broken, it took weeks just to admit there was a problem and months to fix basic issues. By then, the players were already gone. Valve respects players enough to admit mistakes, react swiftly, and move on. When was the last time a AAA shooter patched something that fast? Hell, half of them take weeks or months just to acknowledge that their games are even broken. This minimal but meaningful update strategy might seem lazy to people who've been conditioned by Fortnite's endless novelty treadmill, but it's exactly why Counter-Strike players stick around. Each operation, each balance patch, each map tweak is anticipated like a rare event. Valve doesn't saturate you, they tease you, they build genuine excitement. Imagine players actually looking forward to an update instead of dreading how it'll break the game, and that restraint has paid off. Valve's careful maintenance has resulted in one of the most loyal fan bases in gaming history. Now, speaking of mastery, let's talk about skill expression, because modern shooters seem determined to remove skill entirely. Every FPS today wants to hold your hand. Aim assist, huge hitboxes, forgiving recoil patterns, and gadgets that practically play the game for you. Apex literally tells you where bullets land. Call of Duty gives you literal wall hacks as kill streaks. Even Valorant, one of the few modern games that actually respected Counter-Strike's formula, added abilities to make things easier for casuals. So why does Counter-Strike stubbornly refuse to follow suit? Because Counter-Strike isn't afraid to punish you for sucking. And honestly, I respect that. It's refreshingly honest. Recoil in CS isn't just pull down slightly and win. It's an entire skill you spend years mastering. Movement isn't bunny hopping across the map effortlessly. It's precise, deliberate, and punishing if done wrong. And grenades are tactical tools demanding precision. One wrong footstep, one misplaced flash, and your round is over. Does it feel brutal? Absolutely. But it also means when you succeed, it feels earned. You didn't luck your way into victory. You earned every single kill, every round, every win. And this brutal honesty is exactly why Counter-Strike became the defining esports FPS. Teams practice strategies and map control for thousands of hours, competing at the highest levels where every bullet fired is a calculated decision. Esports organizations know Counter-Strike remains the ultimate test of team coordination and skill, and fans love it because the best team genuinely wins. There's no meta cheese to exploit, no broken characters to abuse, it's just pure competition. CS majors still pull in millions of viewers year after year, despite the game's apparent simplicity. Why? Because real skill, teamwork and genuine tension never get old. You can't fake that. But here's the real question. If Valve figured out the perfect formula decades ago, why does literally every other studio continue fumbling around cluelessly, releasing sequels that sabotage their own legacy? Why do multi-million-dollar projects like X-Defiant, Concord or Assassin's Creed Shadows flame out almost immediately upon launch, despite enormous budgets, focus group testing and lavish marketing campaigns? These games are hyped into oblivion, shoved down our throats with endless trailers and influencer partnerships, only to collapse instantly after release. What exactly are they missing that Counter-Strike clearly figured out ages ago? And even crazier, why don't these studios learn from Valve's success? Counter-Strike's blueprint has been openly available for 26 years. This isn't some secret formula locked away in a vault. The design choices, minimal updates, community-driven ecosystem and skill-based gameplay are all out in the open. Yet somehow modern developers still pretend the problem is market conditions or audience tastes changing, rather than admitting they're the ones who fundamentally misunderstood what players wanted all along. Well, I've got news for you. Players haven't changed, the industry has. Studios now focus entirely on short-term profit, pumping out shallow sequels and trendy gimmicks because they think that's what gamers want. But gamers don't want another forgettable shooter. They crave something real, something that respects their time and skill. So what's Counter-Strike's actual secret ingredient? Why do millions keep coming back when every flashy AAA FPS fades into irrelevance almost overnight? Well, it's simple. It's because Counter-Strike is everything modern shooters are too scared to be. Brutally honest, endlessly rewarding and unapologetically hard. And trust me, the industry's refusal to learn this lesson is costing them dearly. But we're just getting started, because the deeper you go into Counter-Strike's success, the more embarrassing the rest of the industry looks. Valve understood something from day one. You don't build a community by forcing hype. You earn it by building trust. While AAA studios were busy chasing short-term spikes, Valve was quietly planting seeds that would last decades. And no seed was more powerful than Counter-Strike's relentless focus on community-driven content. Let's talk about modding for a second. You know, the thing publishers love to claim they're totally supportive of, yet actively sabotage because they're afraid it'll affect their quarterly skin sales. Valve, on the other hand, didn't just embrace modding, they literally built Counter-Strike out of it. Remember, this game started as a mod for Half-Life, not a corporate planned blockbuster. The irony is painful. Major studios spend millions trying to artificially create what Valve achieved organically, a dedicated community invested enough to literally build their own game. But why does modding actually matter so much? Think about this. Players make new maps, test gameplay tweaks, and sometimes introduce ideas Valve themselves never considered. And here's the thing, Valve listens. They don't just cherry-pick easy wins. They actually integrate player-made content into official updates. Dust 2, arguably the most iconic FPS map ever made, was community-created. Mirage, Inferno, Overpass all started as community concepts or modded maps. Instead of letting their ego hurt and separating their player base, Valve saw brilliance and elevated it. Other studios just see modding as a threat to their monetization strategies, or worse, ignore it completely. Big mistake. But modding isn't Valve's only play. It's just one pillar of the holy trinity that keeps Counter-Strike immortal. Esports is also something Valve nailed, so much so that there are more concurrent viewers watching Counter-Strike esports than the peak concurrent players. Meanwhile, every AAA developer seems convinced that buying expensive stadiums and throwing money at tournaments is the magical solution to community engagement. Spoiler alert, it isn't. The reason Counter-Strike became one of the longest-lasting esports titles in history isn't because Valve threw endless cash on it. It's because the game itself naturally created drama, tension and hype that no marketing campaign could fake. CS tournaments aren't exciting because of flashy stage designs or celebrity appearances. They're exciting because the skill ceiling is so insanely high. Every match is filled with moments of a genuine drama, clutch plays, impossible comebacks, and heartbreaking defeats. You can't buy this kind of authenticity, but God knows other publishers keep trying. Compare that to Overwatch League. Blizzard spent over $1 billion, yes, a literal billion, forcing esports into existence, paying for expensive arenas and absurd franchising fees, all to chase a trend they clearly didn't understand. And what happened? Viewership collapsed, investors bailed, and the game itself suffered, as Blizzard desperately tried to force-feed esports down everyone's throats. Why did Overwatch fail where Counter-Strike succeeded? Simple. Authenticity can't be bought. Players and fans gravitate toward genuine competition, not corporate-funded pageantry. And the third pillar, the skin economy, is possibly Valve's best move yet. On the surface, it's easy to dismiss skins as just flashy pixels, digital trinkets that shouldn't matter. But the numbers don't lie. Counter-Strike's skin market has ballooned into a $4.3 billion economy. You heard me correctly, billion with a B. Players don't just trade digital cosmetics. Entire YouTube careers, Twitch streams, and even livelihoods have been built off skin trading and crate openings. Valve managed to turn cosmetic items into actual status symbols with real-world value. The skin economy is literally its own self-sustaining ecosystem, one that incentivizes continuous player engagement without forcing anyone to buy into it. And this is critical. Valve didn't shove loot boxes or predatory battle passes down our throats. Instead, they set up a system where players willingly participate because they see genuine value. It's the ultimate win-win. Valve earns revenue, players stay engaged, and nobody feels exploited. Now ask yourself, why do modern studios completely miss this? Ubisoft, Activision, EA, they're desperate for quick cash, churning out bloated microtransaction systems that push fans away instead of drawing them in. They could have learned from Valve's subtlety from their restraint, but nope, they doubled down on aggressive monetization and lost millions of players in the process. Honestly, it's pathetic to watch billion-dollar companies fail so spectacularly at something Valve nailed effortlessly a decade ago. But let's dig deeper. Why do supposed Counter-Strike killers fail every single time? We've seen countless studios try and fail miserably to replicate CS's success. Remember Lawbreakers? Probably not. It crashed and burned so fast you'd blink and miss it. Ubisoft tried with X-Defiant, promising an FPS built by the community, whatever that means, and still stumbled straight out the gate. Even Call of Duty routinely attempts to reclaim the competitive FPS crown, but ends up flailing desperately with gimmicks instead of solid mechanics. The fundamental problem is simple yet devastating. Studios chasing Counter-Strike always misunderstand what actually makes it great. They focus on superficial elements like aesthetic, gimmicks, or modern mechanics, instead of the ruthless simplicity that defines CS. Even Valorant, the closest anyone has come to challenging CS, still added heroes and powers, complicating what was nearly a perfect competitive formula. Valorant has done well, sure, but it never dethroned CS, and frankly never will. CS is still gaining players and reached the recent peak that we saw. Why? Because simplicity and mastery trump flashy gimmicks every single time. And yet, infuriatingly, the industry still doesn't get it. AAA developers keep launching bloated sequels with grandiose roadmaps, promising massive changes and revolutionary mechanics. Assassin's Creed Shadows conquered Battlefield 2042, each hyped up as the next big thing, yet all failing spectacularly because they replaced what players loved with shallow trend-chasing features nobody asked for. Let me put it bluntly, players are tired. They're not craving more, they're craving better. Counter-Strike is proof that players don't need constant reinvention. They need consistency, polish, and a fair competitive playing field. This industry obsession with gimmicky updates, constant novelty, and superficial innovation isn't what gamers ever asked for. We don't want meaningless content, we want meaningful experiences. And frankly, I'm tired of studios pretending they don't understand this. But it's not just annoying, it's economically idiotic. Studios spend hundreds of millions chasing short-term trends, losing money repeatedly when gamers inevitably see through their shallow tactics. Imagine if EA or Ubisoft took even half the money wasted on useless sequel reboots and instead focused on mastering their core gameplay, or, God forbid, listening to their players. Instead, they rinse and repeat their mistakes yearly, somehow expecting different outcomes. Counter-Strike's enduring success is an embarrassment to AAA studios precisely because it exposes their incompetence so blatantly. If a 26 6-year-old game with minimal updates and virtually no traditional marketing can still dominate the charts, what's their excuse? They have infinitely more resources yet continually squander them on meaningless fluff instead of genuinely good design. And trust me, this isn't just me ranting. Look at player reviews and sentiment during major updates. When Valve pushes an update, even if players initially complain, it's almost universally accepted eventually because Valve's decisions are transparent and logical. Compare this to Battlefield 2042's disastrous launch or Overwatch 2's endless community backlash. Reviews plummeting, angry player bases flooding forums, devs scrambling desperately to stop the bleeding. AAA studios have utterly lost player trust, and no amount of hype or PR fluff can fix that. Valve's secret is almost embarrassingly simple. They refuse to compromise the integrity of their gameplay for short-term gain. They're confident enough in their product to let it speak for itself. Valve doesn't rely on constant artificial hype. Their marketing is literally just letting the game be good. You know how crazy that sounds in 2025. Valve doesn't waste millions on CGI trailers or influencer campaigns. They just deliver a polished experience and the players handle the rest. It's honest, it's confident, it's smart. This honesty is exactly why Counter-Strike transcends generations. It's not flashy, it's not gimmicky, yet it pulls in new players every year. Newcomers see something refreshingly straightforward, while veterans appreciate how Valve hasn't betrayed their loyalty. CS doesn't need to reinvent itself because its core is timeless. Unlike modern shooters that panic and pivot every 6 months, Counter-Strike remains confidently itself, decade after the decade. So let's finally answer the big question. Is less actually more? Are modern players craving simpler, more focused gameplay instead of endless gimmicks and superficial content? Counter-Strike is absolute proof of this, but the industry still won't listen. They stubbornly chase trends instead of perfecting gameplay, and it's costing them billions. The bottom line is this: Counter-Strike isn't a miracle, it's just a studio respecting their audience, being brutally honest about what their game is, and refusing to compromise that for short-term gains. It's a lesson every AAA developer desperately needs, yet continues to ignore, and unless the industry finally wakes up, they'll keep burning hundreds of millions chasing illusions, while Counter-Strike quietly hits another all-time high.